When I was a child, I was a little shit. I stole in stores and from relatives, swore and threw things at random people walking down the street, smoked from the age of 12 and didn't care about everyone except friends. They were my real family, or I thought so. The 5 of us were in trouble every fucking day. My parents, although I later said that they should have been tougher in matters of discipline, were not to blame for this. I was just a wayward child. I thought all these actions made me cool. I can't describe the superiority I felt when I made adults fear me. It gave me a sense of strength, power. This is what I craved when I was younger. I could keep talking about my sins, but the point is that I was just fucking all over my head. I made up for my guilt as best I could, in front of whomever I could, but we are not here for my self-flagellation, we are here for revenge. In short, when I was 16, my parents finally had their patience, and despite all my tantrums, screams and even physical impact on my father, they decided to send me to a school for difficult teenagers. I call it a school, but in fact it was a military institution in which discipline was shammed by the most cruel and effective methods, teaching several literacy and numeracy lessons along the way. Without going into details, I will say that this school has changed me. Although I was aggressive, cruel, self-confident and almost suicidal, when I was first left on the doorstep, the people in the camp broke me. I stayed there for a little over a year. No phone calls, no home visits, no access to the outside world. For a whole year, this camp and these counselors, these real harsh men taught me what a shit I really was. By the end of the second summer, I had changed. I fought, screamed, got kicked more times than I could count, but in the end I was defeated. These people taught me that real men do not behave like me, and that the path I followed would lead me either to prison or to a grave. They were extremely honest, especially Consultant Jay. By the end of my Severy time, I considered Jay to be the second father. Although at first I hated him for making me feel inferior, he really did me a favor by opening my eyes to how toxic my behavior was. And to this day I consider him something like a hero. He was the main person who thought I was ready to return home. But the background is very long, so let's move on to history. When I got home, I turned from a cruel little jerk into a little civilized young man, ready for the last year of high school. I was nervous going back because I had already adapted to the disciplinary school lifestyle, but at the same time I was excited. I missed my friends and hoped that they would take me back, despite the fact that I haven't talked to any of them for more than a year. And to my relief, I was received with open arms. One of my closest friends moved to another state during my absence, but the other 3 were delighted to meet me. Over the next few weeks, I calmed down and didn't spend much time with them outside of school. My parents kind of checked how much I grew up after returning, and set the limits of when I can leave the house, how long I can be absent, where I can go, etc. I was determined to prove to them that I was no longer the same bastard who had ruined their lives all these years, so I followed their rules and talked to friends only at school. All this has to do with the case because of what happened next. I joined the school football team, which included all 3 friends, and one evening after training all my teammates were in the gym, sweating and dirty, but happy with themselves. I laughed and chatted with 3 best friends so much that I didn't notice that we were left alone in the hall. And at that moment the conversation turned to a bad path. One of the friends, for simplicity I will call him D1 Friend 1, started telling me about the college party they all plan to go to, and that they have been going to college parties for several months in a row, because it's easy to get girls and drinks there. I doubted, because I didn't think that Mom and Dad would agree to let me go, but then D1 talked about the girl he was going to invite. She studied at the same school as us, but she was not the girl with whom, as I thought, D1 had some real relationship. I knew her, but I didn't know her. He began to tell the rest of his friends and me that he had been trying to drag her to bed for a long time, and she finds excuses all the time, so he plans to take her to a party and finally divorce her. When I asked him jokingly, "Why are you so sure she won't refuse you again?" He looked me straight in the eye and said as casually as possible the most chilling phrase I have ever heard in my entire life. "I'll just put something in her drink. It will relax her, and there will be no problems." At first I just laughed awkwardly, thinking it was some kind of shitty joke, but they didn't laugh with me. When I asked him if he was serious, D1 said that he was tired of her fucked games, that she was just screwing him up, and that the pills would simply ease the situation. I couldn't believe my damn ears. I quickly withdrew from the conversation and rushed home, most likely after passing a few stop signs, but I don't remember. All night I convinced myself that my friends were just fooling around. A few more days passed, and the conversation in the locker room was almost forgotten, although they did not keep silent about the party and continued to insist that I slip away and join them. I was repeatedly called a SYKL for the fact that I refused because of my parents, but I waved it off. Then the shit finally got into the fan. During the next after-school training, we were again the last in the locker room. And D1 does what I didn't expect for 1,000 fucking years. All three of them were talking about the party all this time, and then D1 started rummaging through the sports bag. He told us look at this and threw D2 a small bag with small pink pills. And immediately I felt the blood flow from my face, and it was as if a bomb had exploded in my head, and the voice in my mind shouted, "Damn it, it's really happening, it's serious, fucking shit." It's hard to describe what I felt when D1 began to talk in detail about how he plans to invite a girl to a party, add something to her drink and use the bedroom of one of the guys from the fraternity for several hours. I was sick. I could literally spill the contents of my stomach on the floor, listening to all three talk about how amazing the party will be, after they just described how they plan to rape the girl. I couldn't stand it and ran away again. That evening I really vomited. I was scrolling in my head again and again what I had just witnessed. I almost couldn't believe it. These three boys have been my friends for 15 years. I considered them my family, I thought I knew them better than anyone else, but 1 year of separation and such. I'll tell you that I really burst into tears that evening. I'm not ashamed to admit it. But what I'm ashamed of is how long I couldn't pull myself together and cope with it. I knew I had to tell someone, but for some shitty reason, I was still loyal to them. Don't crucify me for this, now I know what I should have done, but I was 17, and they were my best friends. I didn't want them to have trouble, but at the same time I knew that I couldn't leave this shit without attention, so instead of reporting everything I heard to an adult, like a fucking man, I decided to figure everything out myself. I went to D1 and told him not to do what he had planned. He told him that it was stupid and dangerous, that it would ruin both his life and the life of the girl he was going to pump up drugs. He didn't even blink. He told me straight to my face that the school I was sent to turned me into a sucker. That he hates how much I've changed and tried to get me back with D2 and D3. He even told me what they were talking about me behind my back, and how they plan to put me with a girl when D1 is done with her to show me what I'm missing. Then he said something I will never forget. He told me, word for word, I'm doing this little bitch a favor. She's a fucking virgin. And after this party, your mom won't be the only one who finally gets a dick. I hit him. We fought, and we were both sent home for a fight. I couldn't fucking believe it. I was beside myself with rage. My best friend told me that. My best friend told me that he was going to rape an innocent girl at a party, and I was a snert, since he didn't want to join. I was disgusted. I was disgusted to the core. And I'm done with him. My parents were disappointed that I was suspended from classes so soon after returning home, but I just sat quietly while Mom cried and Dad shouted at me. Now I understand that I should have told him, but after what D1 told me, I had a crazy idea in my head that I should solve the issue myself. And now about revenge. After the weekend under house arrest, I returned to school and first of all found D1. He was about as beaten up as I was, but he had a good bruise under his eye from my blow to the face. D2 and D3 were standing next to me, and they all stared at me when I approached them. Then I did what made me sick. I apologized to him. I told him that I was sorry that I hit him and that he was right, I changed, and I hate what the school has done to me, and I want to be the same again. Surprisingly, they all bought into it. D1 and I even hugged, and the cherry was the fact that I promised them that I would come to the party. And now about my stupid teenage plan. First of all, I started recording them when we were alone. I wanted to record everything they said about the party and the girl they planned to rape. I knew I needed some evidence, otherwise it would just be my word against them. And a few days later I recorded more than enough. But I haven't finished yet. No, my stupid self had a plan, and I was going to implement it in full. So I found the girl, took her aside and told her everything. She was mad and scared, but I begged her not to contact the police and not to tell anyone. Now I understand that it was also stupid, but for some reason she listened to me. I had a plan. Crazy, stupid plan to teach them all a lesson. I told her to tell D1 that she would meet him at the party, but she stayed at home myself to be safe. Later on the same day, D1 began to brag that the girl had accepted his invitation, and everything was going according to plan. And I was sitting there, half taking the phone out of my pocket, and recording it all. Finally, the night of the party came, and I slipped away, because, I was punished. I think it's worth noting that I wasn't overwhelmed with guilt and complacency all night. I doubted myself, but somehow strangely I felt betrayed. These 3 guys were my brothers even before I learned to fight, and I felt betrayed that they went this way. I was even more tormented by the thought that I could have become like them if my parents hadn't sent me away. It was a strange moment of awareness in the middle of a crowded student fraternity house. You are surrounded by drunken idiots, but you accept what life leaves you. The night continues, and D1 is getting more and more upset due to the fact that the girl he invited never showed up. I tried to keep him in sight all night, not wanting him to decide that any girl would suit him if he could not take the one he wanted. I kept my eyes on them, watching them get drunk, and I remained as sober as possible with the help of water in a beer can. When midnight came, all 3 were drunk, and I knew that by this time all the girls at the party were safe. By this time, the crowd had already dispersed, and several people who were not standing on their feet had already passed out throughout the house. Now it's time for me to flash. While all 3 were busy playing drinking, I rummaged through the D1 bag and found a bag with small pink pills. Here I did something I'm not particularly proud of, but I'll tell you anyway. I poured 1 tablet into 3 bottles of beer and distributed them to friends, and then waited. Very little time passed, and all 3 of them were sent on the floor, like many other guests of the party. Then I took a black permanent marker out of the bag and wrote rapist on the foreheads of all 3, took a picture of them and immediately uploaded them to our school's Fbook page so that everyone who studied there could see. Admittedly, I didn't think this part very well, because not only did it in front of all the people at the party who were still conscious, but I also knew that the photos would not last long on the school website before they were deleted. But since it was a small school in a small town, I had no doubt that a bunch of people would see it before the teacher deleted the photos, and this is exactly what I wanted. Then the records followed. When I got home, my parents gave me a verbal whip for running away, but they stopped when I finally told them what was happening. They were both shocked and didn't fully believe it, but when I lost both recordings to them on the phone, they felt as disgusted as I did. I was silent in the car while my father was taking me to the police station, giving a lecture about the fact that I should just come to him, and what I did at the party was not necessary. But at that moment it seemed to me that it was so. My phone was already bursting with comments from students who commented on photos of 3 of my former friends with the inscription rapist on their foreheads. And although many just laughed at them, many wondered if there was some truth in it. That was what I wanted. I wanted everyone to know who they really were, so that they had nowhere to hide. The hours spent at the police station were, admittedly, very scary. I still doubted whether I did the right thing, but my friends chose their own fate. I was still hurt and offended that they allowed themselves to become like that, and although I felt a little guilty for being able to ruin their future, I did what I had to do. As a result, the records were enough to accuse them all of planning a crime. Since the name of the girl whom D1 planned to drug was named, her parents, of course, were enraged and demanded to arrest all 3 of my former friends. I would have been arrested if the girl hadn't told her parents and the court that I warned her to stay away from D1 and the party. I was accused of using banned substances because I confessed that I used pills against former friends, as well as inflicting beatings, because a permanent marker was considered a form of attack, but fortunately, I did not get a prison sentence. Nevertheless, I got a lot of community service. All 3 were tried as adults in the rape attempt case, but only D1 received a real prison sentence, as he was the one who took out the pills and was the only one who admitted that he wanted to use them. The other 2 received only conditional deadlines and community service for complicity, but in our city they were completely avoided. No one has ever let them forget. I was ready for a response, ready for them to attack me or something like that, but, oddly enough, I think that D1 was imprisoned for what he did made them both think, and they became so smart that they were able to enter college without football scholarships, as they were both kicked out of the team. They didn't approach me anymore, which surprised me, but I didn't care about it anymore. My friends were dead to me long before all this happened, and by the time I moved to college, everything was already behind me. Now I'm in the last year of college and I still sometimes think about the three of them. I think that if my parents hadn't sent me to that special school, I could have become like them. Oddly enough, sometimes I miss them, but I know that I remember the children, not the ones they turned into. I constantly thank my parents for sending me to that school, and even received praise from Jay when I gathered the courage to tell him about what happened. I don't know what will happen to D1 when he gets out of prison, but part of me hopes that he will learn his lesson and live on like me. Jay called me a few days ago, just to check, and I told him the whole story, and that's why I'm telling it on the internet now. I think the moral is that you have to resist your friends when you know that they are doing wrong, but perhaps not in such a stupid way as I did. Always involve other, more qualified specialists to solve situations in which you are not sure. Even if you're a stubborn teenager who thinks he knows everything.